Welcome back to It Just Takes One. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Ethan Spelman. Ethan is the recent best-selling author of a book called Leadership Over Loneliness: How Unleashing the Leader Within Transformed My Life. It is a powerfully inspiring true story based on his life journey. Ethan's life has been filled with many different challenges. And he talks about that not just in this podcast, but certainly in his book even more deeply. Somewhere along the line, he learned about the power of leadership and how bringing out leadership within yourself and learning to lead yourself can then help you to lead others. We talk about all of that as we get into the interview, and you can learn a little bit more about his story. He shares very authentically about some of the challenges that he faced growing up, and he describes some of the leadership lessons that he learned and that he is now sharing with all of us. He has a background in financial management and advising and is currently the president of ETS Coaching and Development in Rochester, New York. I don't want to give away too much, so I'll stop here and invite you to sit back and listen in as Ethan Spelman shares his story. This is It Just Takes One. One person, one experience, one moment to change your life. Ethan, welcome to It Just Takes One.
Kelly, super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here too. And we have to start with a call out to our mutual friend, the person that connected us originally, Marshall Bednar, who is a dear friend of mine for so long because he married my best friend from school back in the day when I was in elementary school. She was in my kindergarten class, even Barb, and Marshall married her, and I've been friends with them for so long. And it was such a pleasure and treat to have him introduce us. Tell us how you know Marshall.
Yes, Marshall and I had worked together years ago, and we probably worked together for about 9 or 10 years at a different financial institution in Rochester here. And I left, hadn't talked to Marshall in about 10 years. And as I was going through this process of trying to understand and really put a book on paper, um, fate kind of brought us back together again. And Marshall had started his own business and put something out on social media. And just as I was ready to start something, and it just kind of, the worlds collided, so to speak, and we became re-intertwined. And it really just opened up the doors to this being a possibility for me, and really, really excited that he put us together. And this process has been amazing.
Yeah, it's so exciting for him to have started this new business and helping authors write and get their books out into the world based on his background of having been a published author as well. But also, I remember him, he was actually here visiting, he and Barb were here visiting last summer, and he had mentioned that he had connected with you and that you were working on your book, and that he was hoping that once it got to the point where you could publish it, that we could connect. And so you've been working on this book for a while. This isn't something that came together in a few weeks. Share a little bit about when you started working on the book and what was it that made you decide this was the time to write it?
So the book itself has been, I've always wanted to write. I've always loved writing, just whether it was, for the school newspaper in college and different things, but I always wanted to tell my story. And I just over the years, just saved little ideas or snippets or quotes or pieces. And I kind of kept them over the, and I'd say in my mind, there were so many different iterations of what the book could be. And then when I finally got to the point where, okay, it's time to get serious and put this, that was probably about 4 years ago, give or take, was when I said, okay, I got to stop talking about it because I keep telling people I want to write a book and I just have to do it. And Kelly, as you know, it's not just an easy, hey, I'm going to sit down and just write a book, right? It was 4 years in the making. And even, until Marshall, I had 30 pages of an essay when I first met him, basically, as I look at it now. and being able to work with somebody like him who could really understand what I was trying to do, the direction I ended up going, and how I was able to intertwine my story with leadership principles and bringing me to where I was, as opposed to maybe 10 years ago where it was just going to be my story. Um, and so being able to have somebody alongside me to kind of guide and hold me accountable to the process, it amazed me that in less than a year, we were able to take that essay and really push it forward into the book that it's ready to become now.
You make a great point, and I want to just reiterate it because we will have listeners out there who have thought about writing a book. Same to you, told people they're going to do it, haven't started. So I want to encourage you, if you are a person out there who is thinking about writing a book, you just heard that oftentimes it happens in a slow start. You kind of make the decision, you make the commitment, and you start writing. But having somebody to help you also guide the process makes it happen a little bit quicker. So once you connected with Marshall and he was able to help you, Ethan, it makes it move along a little bit better. So I just want to reiterate that for any listener out there who's thinking, I don't know where to begin. I don't know how to begin. I want to do this, but what do I do? Just start. And if it gets to a point where you might need some help, reach out and get some help, because that does make the process flow a little bit better too.
Learned a lot about myself through the process. I write like I talk, so not probably the best way to put a book out there with a lot of dashes and dots, and so having that person to kind of check that as well through the process. Like I said, it call me. I'd be happy to basically encourage anybody, because you can do it, and it's just a matter of just being able to see it, put it down one page at a time, and then be able to really have somebody alongside you to help you articulate it, what you want to say, would be a huge help along as well. So
It's something that it's just funny that you mentioned that, because I've had that thought before in the time that I've been doing this work, that the way we speak comes out one way, but translating that onto the page and into writing, it isn't the same. It doesn't quite come back the same for the reader as it does for a spectator in the audience. So great point, really great point, that if you're a person that speaks and has a great speaking presentation voice and can tell stories, that doesn't always translate onto the page the same way.
yeah, and I'll say this, and I know you and I have spoken about this, is that I don't have a tattoo, never had one, but people say that if you get one, you probably got to get two, and then you go. So now that I've written one, I see myself already wanting to write a second and potentially a third. So it's just opened the doors for so many different ideas, and for me, and what may transpire out of this, who knows? But I'm just excited to keep it going, and it's just been an amazing experience.
Yeah, so cool. I love that. So let's talk about this one before we get on to other books. Let's
Sure.
get this one out there so people
No
really
doubt.
understand what this book is about. The title of the book is Leadership Over Loneliness: How Unleashing the Leader Within Transformed My Life. Ethan, you mentioned just a minute ago that when you first started writing the book, you were thinking maybe it would be your story, but after working with Marshall, you kind of came up with this integration of your leadership principles intertwine with your life story. But why that title specifically? Why leadership over loneliness?
So my story starts from a lonely place, and that's where as I've really dove into leadership and really the study of leadership, and really committed myself to that, based whether it's roles that I've been in professionally or just leadership in life. I've been able to really kind of take that place of loneliness over time and really have kind of flipped the script a little bit, and really use leadership to really help fill a lot of what wasn't there for me growing up. And so, it's been a process, and I think that's where the book kind of came into play when I was first starting out, and I was saying I was going to make this about my past and my story. Again, everybody's got a story, and that's always been my thing. Everybody's got one, and mine is just unique to me. But you know, I wanted to basically be able to take what I've learned and how I've been able to overcome some certain things in my life through leadership and through the principles that I've learned and all my failures and the different things that I've let has happened along the way, um, to really want to be able to help people understand that, you know, there are some things that I've shared that I'm sure other people have experienced as well, right? It's not, and so it's not just to me, but just us to those same people. Hopefully they see, hey, there's a path here. There's a path, and hopefully my story and what I've learned and how I can articulate it back can kind of show that, you know, you can win at the same time. And so that's kind of that leadership over loneliness of, hey, where I was, but where I'm at today is kind of transcended and come over that. And I'm a different person because of it.
Hmm. I want to dive deeper into that because you, as you said, your story starts with loneliness, and that's certainly an experience all of us have had. It's a collective human experience. We all understand loneliness, and to your point, everybody has a story, but yours is unique. So when you say your story begins in loneliness, can you share a little bit more about that, about your upbringing, some of the things that left you feeling lonely in your life?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, don't want to give away the book, but I'll tell a little bit. Um, and it starts with, um, you know, the first recollection that I have of, you know, you think back, when's the first memory that you have? And the first memory that I ever have of myself is just standing alone in a dining room in a house that we had in Rochester and just feeling this, that I was alone. I was probably about 4, so I couldn't even tell you where my parents were, if they were even in the house. If I don't know that, but I just remember that moment. And that feeling has really carried with me my whole life. And I've called it many things: empty feeling, alone feeling. I used to share. So, you know, it's carried in multiple different facets. And, you know, to share some of the story, I mean, I've grown up. I'm the oldest of 6 children. 3 are adopted, were adopted into the family. My, my, I guess you'd say, from my perspective, a lot of things were left on the table, right? Because I think with the children that were adopted had needs of their own that needed to be met, and I think a lot of the focus was spent there. So again, you know, I thank my mom and my dad in my book, but I also, you know, this isn't a shot at them at all. I think they did what they had, or gave what they had with the tools that they had, right? So I think that spoke a lot into a lot of the aloneness as I was growing up, of not necessarily having um, that, I guess you'd call it, care or development or different things that I could look back and say, you know, I wish that this was different. I wish this was different. Can't go back, right? It is what it is. And I've done a lot of self work to try to understand it, right? And kind of put it in its place and really learn from it. Um, but there was just so many different avenues that went, that, you know, I felt that that one moment of me standing in that dining room, to, you know, a story that I referenced where I woke up scared one night and I was told to go sleep in a dog bed, right? And, you know, just little things like that where you kind of look back, and when you're growing up, you don't know any different. But then when you grow up, you're like, whoa, but now wait a minute, right? And I've got kids of my own, and how am I gonna, you know, a family of my own? How do I learn from that so I don't bring that same environment in? Yeah, so I that loneliness piece really resonated right up. I mean, and I still deal with it today. There's still portions, right? There's still things that happen. It doesn't go away. To your point, I think as humans, we all have those moments, right? Whether it's uncertainty or whether it's, we're just, you know, we don't understand a scenario, we lack clarity, and we feel alone in certain either relationships or friendships or just in life in general. Um, and I think it starts with being aware. And I think a lot of it, I wasn't, I just was living in it. And decisions that I made to try to fill it weren't always the best. Um, right. I mean, I ran away from home at 18. a lot of things just running from it. I was running, constantly running because I was too embarrassed about everything else that I was living in and not necessarily didn't have the tools to face what was actually happening in the moment until much later in life. And that's where a lot of the work has been done recently for me personally. And a lot of it, focuses for me on being just aware of myself and my surroundings and who I am and in those moments and trying to figure out the tools necessary to try to move past it if that feeling comes back. But I don't think it'll ever go away. I think it's just understanding different ways and different things that I can do to get over the top of that. And that's where leadership came.
Mm, mm. So many things there to dive into, and I don't want to give away the whole book. If you're listening out there, Ethan, you just scratched the surface. So those of you listening, get the book. You'll get more detail and you'll hear more about that story. A couple of things that stood out to me when I was reading it, when I had the chance to read the book, was to your point, you came up in a family of six. Eventually, you were the oldest, but eventually six kids, three adopted, as you just described. And that made a lot of sense in terms of that feeling of loneliness and maybe not the full nurturing that you would have had in a different scenario. You also spoke, as you just said, to some of the decisions that you made to fill that void and that most people make to fill the void. There are all kinds of ways to fill that hole that you're feeling, that loss. Most of them not so positive, especially at that age. And so one of the things that really struck me as I was reading your story, Ethan, is that although a lot of people out there will feel what you felt in terms of feeling lonely, feeling a void, feeling like they're doing something to fill it, but it's not really working. There comes a moment where there's a choice. You either keep making those decisions and your life goes one direction, or you choose to do something different and try and make a different life for yourself. And that's what you did. Can you talk more about what it was that made you choose to fight forward, to overcome some of what you were experiencing, to learn more about yourself in it, and to grow rather than continuing on the path that might have led you in a different way?
Because I could probably think back to a couple of different times, right? Because as I said, it wasn't that I just woke up one day and said, yep, I'm choosing this path and this is what's going to happen and the rest is going to take care of itself. Because I did choose a path and then fell. And then, oh, this maybe wasn't the right path. And then I always knew that the one thing, I guess, growing up that we were kind of held to a standard of expectation from the outside. So if there's one thing that's always stuck with me, it's how do you present yourself to the outside, right? And create that, you hear a lot about masks and all the different things, right, that people put on. So for me personally, that was something that became probably my biggest fallback, was living in those, like making a choice, but still living in this facade of, and until I could commit myself to saying, okay, strip the mask. What you see is what you're going to get. If I fall, I fall, but I'll get back up and I'll figure it out. And I truly do believe that it took me the majority. I mean, soon to be 52. It took me probably until my late 40s until I truly have, not to say I figured it out, but I somewhat figured out the path. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, and I know we keep driving back to it, it's in the title of the book, but really stemmed from investing in myself. I thought for a long time that things would just happen, right? You get a promotion at work and you get this manager title and then you just lead people, you manage people. But until I really started to understand what it meant to invest in me and truly help do, then I could run on that same parallel path that I wanted to be on. Outside of that, I was just going one way and saying to everybody else and creating that path of, yeah, this is where I want to go. this is where I'm really doing this, but was I? No, until I was really able to just look inside myself, truly be able to, and it really started with me committing to truly learning what it is to lead, not just other people, but myself first. Because if I
Mm.
can't lead myself, I can't, I'm going to fail all the other people around me at some point in time. And then I just allow that perpetual cycle, right? It's that merry-go-round we just keep feeding coins into, and it just keeps going until, to your point, make a choice. And my choice was I got to start investing in leading myself so then I can help and lead my family, lead my friends, lead my, and lead at work and do all the different things that I want to be able to do. So, um, so I think that answers your question, but
Yeah,
yes.
that's really good. It reminds me of a quote, which I won't remember who said it, but it was, leader of one, leader of many. If you can't lead one, you can't lead any. And I really appreciate that you're bringing out the idea that that change, that moment when you make that commitment starts with deciding you're going to lead yourself. It starts with in, not
Sure.
without, right? It starts,
And there's not a lot of easy because I had to come to a lot of um self again, I talked about self-awareness earlier, but I had to really reconcile a lot of different things inside myself of choices made in the past and decisions made and people hurt and friendships ruined and friendships gained and all of the different things that that played a role in it, and realizing that where it came from was just ironically, it was my fear of being alone. I allowed it to perpetuate into everything else that I was doing, as opposed to just leading from the front with myself, trusting that that person's okay, right? That that person is still going to be okay, and people will see me for who I am, and not be afraid to not. And that's where this book comes into play. I mean, I put a lot out there, right? And I didn't. I wanted to be authentic. I wanted to be the term of the year is vulnerable, right? Show vulnerability. Um, but it's true. Like I couldn't do this book if I couldn't be that honest about me and 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 the struggles that I've gone through, and the failures that I've had, because that's part of the story, and that's the part of this whole journey of overcoming this aloneness is realizing that people are going to accept me for who I am, right? I can't change that. If I can continue down this life of creating this facade, great. But at the end of the day, I'm the one left empty, right? I talk about in my book, I reference the man in the glass, the mirror, and looking in the mirror, and I have that taped up in my bathroom mirror. It's all about just looking at and checking yourself every day. Check yourself every day, and realizing not every day is going to be perfect, right? That we're all, what's the theme of my book? We're all a work in progress. I'm still it, right? I'm still it. I'm still going for it. And I'll continue to do it, throughout the rest of my life, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I did want to spend some time talking about that vulnerability piece again, because listeners that are out there may relate to this. Certainly with the authors that I've worked with, I've heard this many, many times where somebody has a pretty deep story, a vulnerable story, not always the prettiest story. And it's hard. It's hard to share it. It's hard to, like you said, take the mask off. It's hard to just be real. And there's also an element of it where people get afraid because it becomes, although it's their story, it also involves the family or friends, people close to them. And there are these questions that they have when they decide to write of, if I write this, is it going to hurt that person? And oftentimes it will stop them from actually writing their story because if they were very honest and very authentic and vulnerable as you were, it's scary and you don't want to hurt somebody else. So what was it that made you get to the point where you felt like I am going to just share it all, and even though this is my story, I'm going to put it out there? And how did you grapple with those questions to get to that decision?
The original title, and I've never shared this with you, Kelly, but I have the original outline years ago. when I was going to put this book together, and it was about life in a glass house. That was going to be the original title. And because when I was just going to make the story about me, um, and I will say that even going through this process over this past year, as we were finalizing and putting this book together, there were, as we talked about Marshall earlier, he'd come back and challenge me. Are you sure you want to say it like this? Are you sure you want to, you know, put this out? And I'll share something um, that, you know, it's still, my father just passed away, um, and he's referenced in the book a lot, but he just passed away about 6 weeks ago. 4 years ago, when I really started to get serious about putting this to paper, he had said to me at that time, he's like, please, I have one request. Do not publish that until I pass away. The irony was I was going ahead anyway, but then he ultimately passes away, right? Before it gets published. Because and again, I really, I wanted to tell my story, and I think I did. And I think through coaching with Marshall and going through the process, I think we were able to not name names and per se, right? And because that was important, there are human feelings involved, and I'm not, the story doesn't change. I didn't change names, but I didn't specifically make call outs either, right? So the story's there, the 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 understanding of what it was and what happened, all there, just not to the extent of putting it. And I was very careful with that. I think my original stuff was, it was all out there, and I, you know, both my parents have now passed, and you know, so again, from that perspective, but you know, I wanted to be cognizant of that in the process, tell my story without necessarily finding a balance. And I think I was able to do that.
And so
I
it's
feel,
not about pointing fingers and throwing stones. It's
oh,
about telling the story and making the point without having to make it
correct,
mean.
correct.
Do you think there was benefit and value of writing it all to begin with, even though you crafted it later and, you know, made it the way you wanted it to actually be perceived in the end? But was there a value for you, almost like a cathartic experience of just being able to just write it?
Stole my word, right? It was very cathartic, and cathartic and hard, at the same time, because, you know, again, many of my, as I said earlier, a lot of my choices were to run the other way, not deal with it hand. This, by writing it, brought a lot back and really just made me question or rethink or replay scenarios in my head or different things that, um, you know, I'm thankful for my family for standing by me, because some of that was a little challenging time for me, um, in reality, because a lot of it was stuff either that had been completely buried, that came up that I had never dealt with, or, you know, from that perspective, just brought some certain things back that I had to face in my own head and in my heart and try to make it right. And so cathartic, yes, hard, yes, challenging, right? All of the different things, but at the same time, um, you know, I'm very happy with how we ended up doing it and putting it out. And I think it tells the story. It doesn't necessarily, to your point, throw stuff. Hence life in the glass house, right? There's no, that was where it was going to go, and there would have been probably a lot of stones back then.
Mm.
Not in this case.
I'm really glad to hear that. And I think it's an important message because oftentimes when I'm coaching somebody through the writing process, I'll say to them, get it out. Not all of that's going to end up in the final version, but if it's in there and it hasn't been processed on some level, then this is the chance to sort of get it out, you know, vomit it onto the page, I'll often say, or just dump the clay onto the table so that it's there. And then once you are able to actually see it in print, it gives you that opportunity to do something different with it. When it's inside of you, we tend to either just push it down, like you said, not deal with it, and it becomes stuck somewhere, toxic almost, or it just goes around and around and it never resolves. And so getting it out and putting it outside of you on paper is one way to grapple with it, as you mentioned, to come to terms with it, to maybe see it differently, perspective changes. And so the idea of taking that time to just share the story onto the page, even if that whole story isn't going to be shared in your book later, is valuable. And you're also bringing out and emphasizing again the point of working with somebody. Part of the writing process is that editing. It's then going back and saying, which parts of this clay are we actually going to use to sculpt the final product? And, just bringing up the fact that you worked with Marshall and he helped you with that. And if you're a listener out there who's hearing this, the importance of having some kind of an editor or book coach or somebody that can help you craft and sculpt the final product. Again, somebody outside of you who can see it from a different perspective.
Able to help me stay accountable to me. Because one of the other things I learned about myself in this process was I'm a writer that just writes. I don't I don't edit and I don't go back and reread. Right. So to have that person read it and then say, you should probably read what you're writing. Right. You should probably, and that was the most challenging part for me, even when the book was done, going back through and reading it start to finish. I hadn't done that. I was just writing and putting stuff together, um and so it, who knows what it would have looked like, or I know that we pulled so many different pages and paragraphs out and different things along the way, but yeah, that accountability person, that person that truly sees your vision, is connected to you and understands it from the beginning, and then is truly able to then hold you accountable to yourself and the story you want to tell. That was the biggest thing.
Yeah, so good, so good. So we've talked a lot about the vulnerability, the your personal story. However, you've mentioned it, and I want to bring out more about the leadership component because the change for you began when you began leading yourself differently. But leadership has become something that's been very important and integral to your personal life, but also your professional life. So let's talk a little bit about the leadership piece and the lessons that you're sharing in this book about leadership, and why do you think that those are important? Let's start with that. Why do you think the lessons are important?
Because I think they're relatable. And I don't think they're just leadership. To me, is like, as I said, it starts with yourself. But I don't look at leadership as I wrote this book. It isn't about, hey, I'm a high end exec and I should just focus in on this book because this is going to give me the tool. I think these tools and these things that I'm taking are stuff that I'm using for my own life, right? And it's not just something to take into the office, because I think in the beginning, if I look backwards, I was handed a manager title, at a local financial institution. I wasn't leading anybody. I was managing people, thinking I was leading people, maybe, but leadership wasn't really a term then, right? It was, you got to manage. Then I got away from it. Then I went back to it, um, and it was then that I was learning lessons without learning them, right? Like, I was failing as a leader and not taking the time to understand why and what am I missing. And then 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, was when I was introduced to John Maxwell and that whole philosophy and the whole idea of investing in yourself and what that truly means. And at first I rejected it. Why am I going to pay money to make myself better? That doesn't make sense. I'll just make myself better. Um, and and it was ultimately when then I give away all of the book here, but was the switch flipped when my father-in-law died, and who was, as I've looked back, was kind of that leader that I've become, but ahead of his time. And just that people person and understanding relationships and the power of people and what it truly meant to just listen to people and really just play off of who they are. And when he passed away, I went on a trip, and literally right after the funeral, And at that point, I just knew I needed to reach out to John Maxwell again, and it was time. That time was for me. And it was that cross country trip to San Diego, thinking in my head, and then that's where things have just always, it's gone from there. And um, so the lessons that I've kind of outlined in the book, I believe there's 10 of them. Yes, there's, I mean, nothing that probably anybody hasn't necessarily heard that's a leader out there. But I think I really try to make it about, again, leading in life as opposed to just leading in the office, and just trying to share some stories, both personally and professionally, to kind of articulate where that goes, and really try to, help leaders understand that I've said this earlier, we're work in progress. We're always looking to evolve. We're always looking to just continue to tweak our mindset and help others, because I truly believe that we have a responsibility as leaders, personally and professionally, to just help people around us be better. Whether that's better people, better at what they do, better, and it all starts again. I'm in full circle in this conversation, just leading ourselves in that way first.
So many good points in there. The first one I want to bring out is, I think, it's the vocabulary. We hear leader, we don't really know what that means. We hear manager, we don't really know what that means. You said you started as a job title as a manager and realized you weren't really leading. In your words, what's the difference between managing and leading?
I think if you're a manager, if you allow yourself to just be a manager, I think you take the people out of it, if that makes sense. Because I think truly, because you're managing to numbers, you're managing to a sheet of paper, you're managing to a spreadsheet, you're managing to an activity. If you're leading somebody, I think you're investing in them, right? And I think there's a huge difference. It's a fine line, because there are times as leaders we have to be managers, right? My title in my current day job is manager, but I won't say it to people because that's the HR title, because I truly believe it's about connecting people. It's about investing in people. And the minute you lose sight of that, then you are just managing. And there's a role for managing, but I think that's the biggest difference, is you go from, it's the people portion of it, and really just trying to understand that, leadership is influence to me, right? Like, we're influencing people. And again, it starts with us, and it starts with expectations and communication and clarity and all the different things that are out there. But and if I was just managing somebody, you don't have to do it. Just, here's a spreadsheet. This is where your numbers are. How you doing now? And I want to make sure that I'm doing more for people, to try to just, because if they're better people, at the end of the day, right? My thing is always, and I've heard this said by other people, but be better today than you were yesterday, so you can be better tomorrow than you were today. Right? I mean, that's the goal. Is we're all taking one step forward. We're all in this life together. Life's going to happen to all of us, but keep developing tools to be able to just be better people. And then I think we become better at what we do and here.
Really beautiful. And so, again, even with that definition that you just described, it starts with leading yourself, because there's no way you can care about those people and really spend the time and understand what they're looking to do, and what their strengths are, and all the components of them, until you understand that with yourself. So then the question becomes, I can hear people asking, yeah, but it feels very self-absorbed. It doesn't feel like it's about them. It feels like, if it's starting with me, it's about me. One of your lessons in the leadership section of the book is be self-aware, not self-absorbed. Can you tell a little bit more about the difference between those two?
Yeah, great question. I think that, and this has been the toughest thing for me to understand, because again, I think too often the best salesperson gets the next leadership job, or the vet, right, or the next manager job. And when I was handed it, I was 28 years old, got my first manager job, and you're like, "Whoa, I got this. I'm good," right? But what I wasn't doing was being truly aware. I was being self-absorbed, because I'm manager. I got the title. Good to go. Everybody listen to me. And I'm going to tell you what I missed was, hey, they need to trust you first. They need to see this leader that they truly want to listen and understand them first. And if they're successful, then I can be as self-absorbed as I want because I win. I win because they win. And so it does create that self-awareness and true understanding of, it does, to lead yourself might seem like you're selfish. It might seem like you're trying to, but leading yourself in the idea that I need them to see me and trust me and know that I'm listening to them and know that I'm going to meet them where they are. I don't expect them to meet me where I'm at. If I do that, they're going to fail. I'm going to get frustrated. It's over. That my thing is, let me meet you where you are. We'll go to where you wanted to go, but we'll do it together. And that's the biggest thing. So that's the self-awareness part for me, is understanding that it's about them. It's not about me. But at the same time, I got to hold myself to standards so they understand and they trust and they know who to call and who they can reach out to and who's going to have their back, because guess what? They're going to slip and fall. They're going to trip. They're going to fail. They're going to do all of that. And if they don't think that I understand or that I'm going to be there with them, then what are we trying to accomplish there? So hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, then nobody wins, right? And I think that trust is so valuable, so important. One of your, in fact, one of your lessons in the leadership section, chapter 15, I think it is about listening. And in my experience, I think listening is a wonderful way to build trust. If they know you're hearing them, not just the words, but you're understanding them because you truly listened, they trust you more quickly. They trust you more deeply because you heard them. But listening is not easy, and it's not something that everybody is skillful at. What would you say to somebody who needs to become a better listener about the importance of listening, and how do you become a better listener?
Communication is simple and hard, right? And I say that because, and in the book I reference this, and I can't take credit for this. I was struggling with listening is such a big piece for me because I truly try to be whoever I'm leading and whatever the scenario is. I try to make sure that they understand that they feel like they're the most important person in the room. Learned that from my father-in-law, right? It was always about ask the question, shut up, right? Ask the question, shut up. And when I was struggling to just comprehend writing this chapter, I reached out to a friend of mine, give him a shout out, Rick Pearson, in Wisconsin. And Rick's been a valued friend. And I said, look, I'm doing something on listening. I know what I want to say, but I'm hitting that writer's block. Give me something that's going to trigger. And he was the one that he said to me, he said, did you know listen and silent have the exact same letters in it? And I went, didn't know. I know that now. And then it just came out because that was exactly what I needed. Because the hard part is, as leaders, right? It's that you're a coach, Kelly. I'm a coach. And through the process, learning that whole fine line between coaching and mentoring, right? And listening is the same thing. When you're asked a question, we inherently, I would say men in general, but leaders in general, managers want to fix everything. We want to fix everything. So we ask a question, and then we may already know what the answer is or how to fix it. And so that's the hard part of listening, like understanding, and that's that whole meeting them where they are. Because I've had multiple conversations with people that I lead that, hey, Ethan, I need you to hear me, right? I need you to hear where I'm at. I need you to understand where I'm at. And it's not about, I know you see the end game or you see that goal line, great, but this is where I'm at. And it is hard. It's nothing that I've mastered. I think listening is an art that will go on forever. And we always are looking and asking to make sure that we're understanding along the way as well, right? Just to make sure that we're all sharing in the conversation. But if we remember nothing else, to listen is to be silent. People will talk, and then we understand. Then we're able to understand more, So then we can, again, meet them where they are to help bring them up to where we think they can. So hopefully that helps.
So good. So good. And so important. And I do think, listening is a skill that we can always improve. It's never perfect and extremely valuable when we do get better at it.
Well, the
It's a
other
gift.
thing is we live through distractions,
Mhm.
right? We have so many distractions, which makes it hard to listen to, right? Emails are pinging, text messages going, phone calls coming in, and it's just really creating that true time and carving it out to make sure you're able to listen, I think, and understanding their environment that you're.
Yeah, it's really, really true. So let's talk a little bit before we end. We need to talk a little bit about what you're doing, what you're going to do with this book, why you're using this book now to help build a platform. Let's talk a little bit about the professional side of things and tell the listeners, what is it that you're doing right now? What are you looking to do with this book? What are you building? Share a little bit about that story.
So great, thank you for asking. And the book, I always had said, if I get to get this book done, this will be the catalyst for me to do a lot of the different things that I want to do outside of my day job, right? And what I realized as I was going through the process is the book becomes the add-on, right? Yes, it's a catalyst of sorts. It's the business card. It's all the different things. But my goals, wearing the logo now, is my coaching and development business that I started last year as well. So life coaching, business coaching, leadership coaching, and trying to build a brand there, right? Where I think the book is going to help enhance that, right? I think, as you and I have talked, creating a workbook or workshops based on my lessons to be able to offer to people, to be able to help them dive deeper. Because again, I think leadership in this space becomes a vulnerable discussion. And it allows for us to be able to really dig in and have different type of discussions as opposed to just go listen, go evolve, go do this. It's digging in and understanding what are the true meanings. I'm starting a podcast as well. So I've over the last 2+ years, I have written a blog that I've posted on my social media, both LinkedIn and now on Facebook. Just mindset things that come to me that I write every single. And so now I'm going back to the beginning of those, which was again over 2 years ago. I think I'm up to 119 straight weeks that I've done this. And it's just random thoughts that hit me during the week that I just put out there. But I'm going to go now and turn them into actual podcasts of some kind, right? Where it's going to be 15 to 20 minutes. Sometimes there'll be a guest, sometimes there's not. So I'm starting that process now. That's going to be called Mindset Evolution. The writings that I do are on LinkedIn are the mindset map. So mindset is that tying word. Because I truly believe that to do any of these things that we want to do, coaching people, developing ourselves, it's about getting your mind right first and being able to find, we talked about Marshall and accountability from my writing, but understanding who our accountability partners are in life and who that can be. And that's what I view myself as, that coach and that personal coach and the leadership coach, that I can be that accountability partner for somebody to be able to help them achieve what they want to achieve in life. And realize that I've come from a place that is not perfect, right? That I would never promote myself as that. There was a time that I would, especially now that the book's coming out, it's out there now, right? How people might have thought I was is going to be completely different than how they see me now, I'm sure. But at the same time, I'm okay with that, because I want to be able to say, going back to this last piece we just talked about, I want to meet people where they are to help them get better to where they want to be. And whatever that means, it's going to be different for everybody. It's not a cookie cutter process. And I just love to be along for the ride and be able to help and see people just develop themselves in the way that they see to be more successful individuals.
So great. So great. And as we're recording this, we're just a couple weeks away from the actual launch of your book. So as we're recording this, it's not public yet, but by the time it comes out, it will be. And so let's share with the listeners, where can they find the book? Because by the time this comes out, it will be available. So where will they be able to find it? And then where will they be able to find you?
Yep. So the book will be on Amazon. sign on Amazon, find it. I'm sure I have to figure out how it works, but I'm sure if you Google my name or you Google the leadership over loneliness, it'll be on Amazon. Um, and then how they find me, it's ethanspelman.com, right? Very simple. Ethanspelman.com. Spelman is with one L. A lot of people make that mistake. But that will be the link into my business. There'll be my podcast. Hopefully, maybe I'll have my first episode by then. I'm close. Um, Podcast, all my blog writings will be on there. The link to the book will be on there. And then everything about the business and the coaching and the different things that I'm doing. So ethanspelman.com for me, access to the book, go to Amazon. And and I'm super excited. 2 weeks out, see what happens.
Yeah, so exciting. So exciting. So many great things to come. I'll make sure all of those links and the link to the book are in the show notes below. So if you want to just go to the show notes below, you'll be able to get to all of those connections, including the book. So that's super exciting. Ethan, and I'm so excited for you and what's ahead, but I'm also excited for the people that you're going to work with. I think the work that you've done on yourself and the skills that you've developed, but also the gifts that you have just as a person are something that people are going to really benefit from. And so I'm excited to continue to follow you and see where you go with the coaching aspect, the podcast, and the next books that will be coming out after this one. But before we finish, I named this podcast It Just Takes One, because to your point earlier, there's always a story. Everybody has a story. It just takes one. It just takes one story told as a book, shared as a book to make a difference in somebody's life. But that term, that phrase actually means something different to everybody. So I always like to just ask the author that I'm speaking with, what does it just takes one mean to you?
Um, Through my journey, I've had a lot of steps backwards, maybe steps sideways. But if you were to ask me right now, and we did not prep this, but the first thing that came to me was stepping forward. It just takes one step forward. Because again, for so long, I was running the other way. I was making choices to not face. I was making all of the decisions, but it was until I took that one step forward. It just takes one, right? And then it's the next one, and then it's the next one. And you find those people that are going to walk alongside you as well. And just glad, Kelly, that we've been introduced, because you're one of those people now for me, and just really appreciate it.
Yeah, right back at you. That's really beautiful. One step forward, one step at a time.
True.
Excellent. Ethan, congratulations on the success and getting this book out. Good luck with everything that's ahead. I'm looking forward to staying in touch, and it's been a pleasure to work with you.
Same. I'm excited for what's to come. Glad you'll be alongside me.
I
Thanks,
will
Kelly.
be. I will be. All right. Thanks so much, and we'll talk soon.